30 years of experience in supply chain leadership. He's a veteran in this field, having served as a senior corporate executive and now as the president of the RML Supply Chain Services. So please join me in welcoming. I have the full name, Robert Lockamy, but Bob, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Exactly. And I'm pretty sure you've seen so many different things over the last 30 plus years, but you worked both as a senior corporate executive and now as a term leader. What's the biggest difference in your approach that you've seen from both the areas?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because there are some key differences. One, coming in as an executive and learning the team.
And if you had to give us like one example of your time as a senior corporate executive or fractional interim leader that you've enjoyed the most, which one would that be?
That's a tough.
What does that mean to you, practical, result-driven leadership in your day-to-day operation when you're looking at it?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And one of the things I think I breathe, having started my career right there.
Over the years, you've learned so many different things, all the way from being the ground worker to C executive and now consultation services. What is that piece of advice that you would give to executives that you would have learned later in life, but you would want them to get it now so that they can build their leadership gaps as they're moving? Welcome, everyone, to the Vserve e-business solution podcast on supply chain management, where we invite some of the industry's great experts to share their experience and gather some helpful tips along the way. I'm Cynthia, your host, and today we are joined by an executive, 30 years of experience in supply chain leadership. He's a veteran in this field, having served as a senior corporate executive and now as the president of the RML Supply Chain Services. He has been focusing on helping mid market, PE backed companies, stabilizing them, scaling them with hands on, results driven approach. So please join me in welcoming. I have the full name, Robert Lockamy, but Bob, it's a pleasure to have you here today.
Thank you. Very happy to be here. And thank you for your time. So I'm very excited.
Same here, Robert. Thank you so much for joining us. And your background is so unique while I was reading about it and all the questions we've been preparing for you for this podcast, bridging the corporate world, making it more agile, functional leadership model. I always start with only one question. How did you end up here? Because the answers are unique and I love it. How come supply chain? How come operations? 30 years of being in it. How did you end up here and how is it going?
It is, I can't believe it's been over 30 years. Part of it's just gone so quick. And supply chain is a very dynamic environment to work in, which is part of why I love it. I got started a long time ago when I was in college loading trucks for a regional LTL carrier at
Uh-huh.
night and spent really the first 10 years of my career within the US trucking industry as a dock worker, a dock foreman, an operations manager. I also did dispatch and load planning. So really all
Wow.
around the domestic freight market. It was fascinating, loved it, very fast paced, very energetic. And one of the things I loved about it was dealing with all of these different industries and different companies and products and product lines, and
Yeah.
then transition to still in logistics, but now on the manufacturing side. I've been in beverages, but I've also been in the mining industry, in packaging, electronics. Great thing about supply chain, and I'd say to anybody looking at supply chain as a career, it is so diverse and variable in so many different angles and so much to learn that
Yep.
has been really exciting. And I know the cliche of never a dull moment, but it's really true in supply chain management.
Yeah. Exactly. And I'm pretty sure you've seen so many different things over the last 30 plus years, but you worked both as a senior corporate executive and now as a term leader. What's the biggest difference in your approach that you've seen from both the areas?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because there are some key differences. One, coming in as an executive and learning the team, you're focused really on that long game. How do I build the right culture within my team and my department? What are our long-term 3, 5 year objectives that we're trying to hit? Obviously, mid-market PE-backed firms, the short time horizon on some of the planning, but you're still kind of keeping a mind on the long game. A
Mhm.
fraction. what you're looking at is much more, all right, what do I need to do now? Either got a clear mandate of we need this process implemented, we need this problem fixed, or we need this department reorganized and set up so that it can function long term. So really it's how far out on the horizon you're looking determines how you approach that.
Yeah. Great. And if you had to give us like one example of your time as a senior corporate executive or fractional interim leader that you've enjoyed the most, which one would that be?
That's a tough one because there's a lot of fun. One fractional leadership role I had, part of it was the company I was working with was an outstanding company, a really
Hmm.
great senior leadership team. All the C-suite executives were just wonderful to work with. And then also the team I had inherited and worked with, they were very engaged. And I think that from that standpoint, it was, hey, yeah, here's our clear mandate. We've got to go be auditable. We've got to make these changes, but we also want to go get these savings
Yeah.
and the energy in the whole team, it would just made it a ton of fun.
Yep, it's the people that you really enjoyed. And I'm pretty sure there has been so many transformational projects over the year as well. And I love hearing stories because I feel I can relate more to it than just theories. So when you're looking at transformational projects that you've worked in, where strategy truly connected from shop to floor results, I would love to hear a story from that end.
Oh, yeah, great. And yeah, that's let me break out my file. So, no, one that comes to mind, and it was a good one. There was a small PE firm, a food manufacturer. So you think a manufacturing facility produced salad dressings and sauces,
Oh, okay.
right? And they had about 8 fill lines running all sorts of different products. And then they had their batching room and their blend room where they would do that. They were trying to really increase PE back. So they're trying to increase their cash flow and their EBITDA while
Hmm.
minimizing capital investment. And one of the things they looked at was, hey, we've got a lot of downtime due to contamination clean out between runs. And that's not an area you can shortchange because you're talking about going from a soy-based product to a non-soy-based product. So you've got allergen contamination that you have to avoid, or
Yep.
going, say, gluten to gluten-free, right? So I went and worked with the scheduling team and also like the quality team and the batching team on, okay, how can we line up really our sequence of items so that we can minimize that downtime so that we're not, okay, clean it all out and we're going to this product. Okay, now clean it all out because those types of clean outs were about 3+ hours. Where if we're doing a clean out that doesn't involve allergens, that was more around 30 minutes. So that's a lot, big time difference. Worked with that team and we were able to do an improvement of 22% more uptime on, and that's across all 8 lines on their time. With that, you can see real tangible results. Working with the team there on the shop floor was real exciting because when they started to see the benefits, they started to get excited about it and started looking at other ways where at first it's we already do it right. And it's okay,
Yeah.
but do we? Let's break it down and understand. So that was one where I really saw some great results. 22% more uptime. That's either less overtime, that's more time to sell more product. That's also a great value generator there. So that was a very
Yep.
successful project, very exciting.
Wow, that's such an amazing story. And that kind of brings me to the next point whenever I hear something like that, because it was a really practical, like a result-driven approach that you did there. What does that mean to you, practical, result-driven leadership in your day-to-day operation when you're looking at it?
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And one of the things I think I bring, having started my career right there, loading trucks really on the ground level, and then having been in the C-suite and talking to boards and executives, right,
Yeah.
is the need for, hey, there's some solutions that sound great, but they don't ever work on the shop floor. Either you're not going to get the team to buy into them or what.
Yeah.
And then the other piece is, hey, some things you implement is, hey, it's better, but is it really?
Yeah.
Show me where it is. And I often talk with teams about if I don't see it in the P&L, it really didn't happen. Or if the CFO can't show me where in the check it is, it didn't really
Yeah.
happen. And so really making sure that items that we implement from just even at the ground level of, okay, we're going to change our workflow, we're going to change our process,
Mm.
but how can we effectively do that? Can the team members who are actually having to do that work realistically do that work, stay
Ex-
motivated to do that work? And then can we turn around? Can we see it in the financials, in the reporting?
Exactly. And that I think that kind of answers my next question as well. From going down the line, it's in design projects, and you've led many over the years. How do you make sure like these processes, they're easy to implement, they're easy to bring in, introduce to a company, but how do you make sure they stick within the organization? I think one is definitely the P&L part that you said, but what are other ways to make sure any process that is introduced gets within the organization and is actually used on a daily basis?
Yeah, no, and that's key, right? It's great for the consultant to come in and say, here's how you do it, and everybody does it. And then
Exactly.
consultant
Yeah.
leaves and they're all like, okay, good, he's gone. We can go back to what we were doing. That never happened.
Exactly.
For me, key to that is making sure that we're driving, working with the team there at the ground level who's actually doing the work in, okay, help us design this process. Here's our
Hmm.
goal, what we're trying to achieve, what has to be true for us to be able to be there. And then
Yeah.
working side by side with them, it's much more of a dirty jeans and boots approach of, yeah, let's go on the factory floor. Let's work with the team that's actually doing the work. And how do we line that
Exactly.
up? Or if it's a corporate process like an S&OP, integrated business planning type process, right? Are the stakeholders getting what they need from the process? So
Yeah.
making sure that the outcome that we need, okay, are we actually getting, and are those that are involved in executing that process, are they really able to do the process, do it alone, and are motivated to do it because they help build it, they help buy into making sure it happens.
Yeah, exactly. And it's another story time for me because I love understanding it by stories. But what's been like your most surprising, like a quick win in terms of freeing up working capital or improving service, but actually like bringing the project up to the team and being like, oh, really? Like this actually stuck. I'm like so happy. So I would love to hear something about that.
Yeah, no, and really, it's fun to think about, and I can think of a few that pop to mind, and we could probably talk for hours on that. I feel like supply chain is how well a company manages its resources, right? Manufacturing
Yeah,
a product is how do I make the highest quality product, right, for the lowest cost, right? Where supply chain is like,
exactly.
how do I efficiently utilize an entire company to drive value? So working capital is a huge part of that. And there was one instance where working with the purchasing team and said, "Hey, well, how can we find some savings?" And immediately they're like, "Oh, we think we're spending way too much on pallets in bulk packaging." Like,
Yeah,
okay, let's go look at that. Let's go. Pallets aren't, that's not a one person makes them and that's it. So
yeah,
we worked across multiple pallet suppliers, identified a really good opportunity that decreased cost, but also found a large facility not too far away that was able to deliver 3 times a week. So what that meant was more deliveries during the week of pallets mean we have fewer pallets stacked up to the ceilings. And you go into a lot of manufacturing facilities. And for me, every
yeah,
time I go in them and see those pallets stacked way up, it's just, oh, safety. And so that was like a really quick win where that next Monday we're issuing POs and we're saving dollars per pallet. And we used a lot of pallets, right? But then in a
yeah,
longer term view of working with additional packaging suppliers, really reduced the cost of super sacks. Those are very expensive bulk packaging items that come overseas in containers, and you got to have a lot on hand. Worked with a new supplier, made a change where they would hold on to the packaging on consignment
hmm,
in the warehouse. And I
yeah,
thought it was just a win-win. We were also able to worked with the customer on the other side of the ocean on, hey, if we made a change, what would something you'd want to see different? And can
yeah,
incorporate most of the customer in that. So yeah, that was one that really generated immediate savings. The CFO could see right there in the P&L,
yeah.
and really was a good win working with the team to get them feeling empowered and excited that, hey, I was part of this and drove this change. And now I'm feeling like, let me see where else we're spending money and where can we save?
Exactly. And talking about money and saving and offshoring, I'm pretty sure like over the years you've consulted and also used a lot of offshoring companies. When when do you think it's the right time or the right job? Or okay, this is where we need to outsource this. We'll save a lot of money. Or no, we need to keep it internal. Like, how do you make those decisions? And are there any specific jobs that are usually used for outsourcing?
Yeah, that's an interesting angle because if we think about a lot of times there's the, okay, what's the lowest landed cost? And I'm thinking specifically of, okay, do I buy domestically or do I buy internationally? Where there are more considerations that get overlooked. If you're in offshoring and you're bringing in material from China or from Vietnam, right? You've got a very long time of stuff tied up on a container and on a ship and then at the
Exactly.
port. And that's a lot of working capital in that and working in environments where it's Yeah, I'll spend a little more domestically, but I've got a lot better flexibility. I've got a much higher service level. And if we think about coming out of COVID, right,
Exactly.
suddenly
Yeah.
everybody knew what a supply chain was. When I was earlier in my career getting my MBA, I was preaching supply chain and nobody else knew what it was. And now everybody's an expert, but understanding that, yeah. And then when it comes to roles, and if I think about roles that tend to get looked at as, hey, can we offshore that? Because we could, with technology and thinking of customer service.
Yep.
When I think of customer service teams, I think fundamentally the core of customer service is to solve our customers' problems. That's why we
Exactly.
have customer service, right? And all
Yep.
the way to order entry, but order entry is, hey, our customer needs something and they're asking us to get it to them. So if I think of kind of three tiers of customer service, and I've worked with organizations on this model, is you've got this foundational tier of transactional, hey, here's my PO. I need an update on my ship date. Hey, where's my product? Hey, what do you have in
Yep.
inventory? Very easy questions that, don't inherently drive a lot of value, right? But are necessary and required. I think when thinking of, okay, are our systems adept enough to be able to where somebody who's not physically sitting in the plant can answer those? Then how do we consolidate those? And then those are also, how do we automate them? How do we improve the workflow? They're very
Yep.
transactional. So how do we get those set up to where we can do a whole bunch of those as easy as possible? And that's
Yep.
where the group, I think, when we think of outsourcing, right? Or offshoring, sorry. Yeah.
Yep.
If then the next tier up is that kind of escalation point of I've got a problem. I'm trying to buy something from you, or you're late, or we've got a quality issue, or whatever. I'm a
Yep.
customer now that has a real problem with the product.
Mhm.
That's that next layer of customer service where I think that's where you want to be a lot more intimate, more grounded, closer to where are we making the product, or where are we sourcing the product from, or where is our customer base, right? And
Exactly.
building where those customers have a problem, making sure if I think about, I travel a lot because I'm a consultant, I fly Delta a lot. Delta to me is like my favorite customer service
Best.
experience, even when I've had a
Yep.
problem because they
Yep.
will work right there with me. They'll get me put on a new
Yep.
flight. They'll fix it. They're very serious about it. And that's
Exactly.
what I want. And then you got that top tier of really that kind of white glove because not all customers are created equal, right? So you've got some customers where really that customer service team is an extension of the account management team. They can
Yep.
handle the problems. They're the one person instead of this customer calling five different locations to figure out what's going on. They call this one person who can take care of everything in the business. And so when I
Yeah.
think of kind of three tiers to customer service, that's what I think. And then back to your original question around offshoring, yeah, if you look at that foundational tier, that's where I think there's a lot of makes a lot of sense for that. And then when you look at the pyramid of it, that's where a lot of people tend to be.
Exactly. And that's the point that you have to look at the area where the outsourcing will fit in. Not every single area fits in with the outsourcing or offshoring. So that's very important for today's generation to understand because most of the time it's we want to save money and they just do everything. And then it's not working, then it's the company's fault. But it's not really that. It's to understand what fits where. And I'm pretty sure in your experience, you've worked with a lot of obviously mid-market and PE-backed companies, but what is like one of the most common mistakes you've seen that they make when they're scaling their supply chains, whether it's internal or whether it's offshoring?
Yeah, and I've seen that. And it's when they're scaling their company and don't scale their supply chain. The thought is, hey, we've got this large new piece of business, right?
Yep.
And then transactionally, have we done the pressure test on our supply chain to see what we may need to do? Because there may be, I've seen like very large new customers, and all of a sudden it's okay, yeah, but here's all the requirements you have to do to ship to us. Nobody knew that. Sales didn't think
Exactly.
that question. And
Yeah.
now the logistics department spending all their time putting together commercial invoices
Yeah.
because nobody told them that they were going to have to be doing it a certain way.
Right.
So really doing that work to pressure test where in the supply chain. I've seen other examples where an investment was made on an asset in a manufacturing facility to increase output, but then that investment didn't follow all the way through to understand, can we load that many trucks out the back
Mhm.
door? And yeah, I've seen that fairly recently where we've upped our output and we're now doing just 30 loads a day right out of the plant.
Yeah.
But then you go to the warehouse and they're like, we've only got five dock doors. We can at most do 15 kind of conversation.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
really not doing the pressure test and the modeling throughout the whole supply chain to see what the real needs are for the business.
Okay. And if I keep going with that question lining, what are some of the signs that you look for in a company that would benefit them?
Yeah, because they're all a little different. And I joke that every company is unique. Yeah, but they're all unique in the same way. Fractional leadership actually a very useful tool and can be a bit of a Swiss Army knife for solutions. So, if you think about various stages a business could be in, one company is going through a major transformation or some uncertain business environment. Maybe there's a divestiture, maybe there's a merger, maybe they're trying to do a turnaround or completely restructure. This is where, hypothetically, a company may be setting itself up to be sold within 12 months.
Yep.
But their supply chain leader left. You don't want to necessarily go out to hire a new supply chain executive when, you know what, you may not have a job in a year. So
Yeah.
this is where I think one example where fractional leadership can come in and say, okay, you know what, that's fine. I won't have a job in a year, but I will help get this company ready to sell, build our
Yeah.
supply chain so it's good and resilient and actually valuable for a potential suitor that would say, okay, this company is actually well run. I think another one is when you have a sudden departure of a senior leader. For me, whenever I lose somebody off my team, I do take that as an opportunity. What don't we do well? Do we need to restructure? How do we want to set that up? If
Yep.
you have an abrupt change, leader can come in and, like we talked about earlier, short term, here's what we need to do. Here's our mandate for now.
Yep.
Let the company itself and work with the company on strategically how do we want to be set up? What type of leader do we need? What skill set do we need? All right, now let's go out and recruit. Let's do the interview process. Let's do those whole steps. And then, by the way, that's a good transition and a handoff. And it's not, you know, our supply chain leader left. So now all our supply chain functions have just been wandering around out in the field and there's no
Yeah.
cohesion. And you got to get that all brought back in. And then, of course, there's always the specialized, hey, we're doing the ERP WMS implementation. We're doing a supply chain planning implementation. There's certainly those. And then, you know, you start to think about there are some companies that could benefit from an executive over logistics, but they're just not big enough to need to pay that much. Or it's good to have somebody with that experience, but then have them, maybe they're only working 20 hours a week on that or 10 to 15 hours a week. And they help with that to where you get the benefit of somebody with all that experience and knowledge, but you can't really afford somebody full time for that. And really, they'd be kind of bored doing it.
Exactly. And it all depends on the leadership, right? At the end of the day, it's how the leadership carry the people and through these times. And that was my next thing is like, how do you make sure when you're exiting from your consultation services, how do you make sure the things that you have built or the capabilities that you have built within the company last beyond your engagement? Is there like a check-in that you do every so often, or is it more like the process that you build within them?
No, it is both, and that is part of the key to consulting from my point of view is, yeah, I can drive great value, but if I've got to be there, I really haven't done my job. I've just helped you cash a
Exactly.
couple of checks. And so part of that is we talked earlier about working directly with the shop floor, with the teams, building good resilient processes that are repeatable, that are very practical.
Yeah.
And so having that, but then yes, on the back end, there are check-ins and there's varying frequency from shortly after an engagement. I might be reaching back out every week or so, just, okay, how are we doing? How are the numbers looking? And then for each of my clients, I do make sure, and this may annoy some of them, I'm reaching out, talking to them every 1 to 2 months, maybe a quarter, knowing where they are in their business cycle. But yeah, staying in touch, making sure that, hey, did you see that? Anything else I can help with? I noticed this in the news. And that's just,
Yep.
I think, basic consulting, making sure that just because that engagement's over, my clients are very important to me and
Yeah.
remain that, even if I'm not actively involved in engagement with them or not.
Perfect. And I'm pretty sure like now with the technology, that's like the big question of the day is like that AI, the digital twins, the automation. There's so many things that are going on, especially in supply chain every single day. Have you piggybacked on these new technologies? What's your thought process on it? Like, where do you see that coming in handy for you and your team right now?
I find it immensely exciting. And I look at what they call the AI boom.
Yeah.
And again, we talked about how long I've been doing this. If I go back to the late 90s when the internet really became a presence and it started to impact the business world, I was thinking about how in 1997, the way I did my job was vastly different than the way I did my job in 2002. Like
Ex-
worlds apart. And I look at AI for that. Part of where I get really excited, and I've done some work with a number of firms and their planning and that is the kind of democratization that's happening through the automation, through the AI development. And then,
Yep.
yeah, digital twins, I had to look that up, but I was like, oh, okay. It was something else in my head. But anyway, part of what I like about the democratization of it is allows for these mid-sized companies that really couldn't afford to go out and get these top tier systems that were really good and really complex and great at planning an entire supply chain, all nice and
Yep.
integrated. You know, a lot of companies were out of being able to do that market. And so you got the original planning system, Microsoft Excel, right? And
Yep.
that's where so many companies, but now with this technology, able to bring that cost down, that cost of implementation, that cost of utilization, it is really good. And plus, I think the configurability now of AI and the number of AI startups. I know I've been
Yep.
working on, hey, how can, my firm better utilize AI to help my clients when it comes to things like logistics planning, maybe order management, and how do we integrate that within their system. So yeah, I think it's a great day. I think I do look at this has the potential of being just as big as when, yeah, the internet really became a thing in the business world and wasn't just a cool little science hobby and that. But I also caution back to Internet of Things seem to not be what it was built to be. Maybe AI
Yep.
fixes, right? Or blockchain within the supply chain, I think was another example of an
Yep.
exciting new technology process that maybe really didn't achieve all it could have because we weren't ready, or maybe it was because it was too complex at the time that AI can help with. I look for, again, 5 years from now, our jobs may be totally different than they are today.
Exactly. Yep. And I know like people are excited about AI, especially in supply chain and what it can do for them, and especially for fleet in all of those areas as well. Yeah, looking forward to that. And I'm loving this conversation. I don't want it to end. I'm looking at the time. I'm like, oh, cool. Okay, now we got to do this. I still want to ask you one last question before ending this podcast is my question to everybody. Over the years, you've learned so many different things all the way from being the ground worker to C executive and now consultation services. What is that piece of advice that you would give to executives that you would have learned later in life, but you would want them to get it now so that they can build their leadership gaps as they're moving along? Give me like three. You want like your top three points or advices for the leadership today.
I think most importantly is don't be afraid to get your pants dirty, right? Go
Yep.
out into the facilities, go out on the shop floor, shake hands, talk to the people doing the work. It goes a long way and helps you really understand. I've worked in companies where that was absolutely the expected culture.
Yep.
That's what you do, and those tended to be the better run companies. Then, but corporates over here, they're in an office, and nobody in the plant knows what corporate looks like, and
Yep.
vice versa. I think that's key. I think second is critical is learn how to communicate with numbers. It's a
Mm-hmm.
business is all about numbers
Numbers. Yeah.
and it's all about the math and learning how to not just do the math but take that
Yeah.
information and execute and communicate with it really becomes I think a key that a lot of people leave out. I've known some brilliant analysts who could build these great models and digital twins and all of that. They couldn't take that and then turn that into, hey, here's action. Here's what this saves us. Here's what this generates us.
Yep.
I've known people who've made tremendous contributions there in the plant, but couldn't turn around and explain what it means, show it in the P&L. Right. So learning how to communicate with numbers is key. And then lastly, wow, it goes fast. And yeah, I had one great piece of advice I got from a boss is failure is an option. If
Yeah.
we're not failing, we're not doing enough and we're being too conservative. We are trying to do a big turnaround here. We're doing a lot of work. And if we're not failing, we're not trying hard enough. And making sure that those failures don't weigh you down too much. Learn from them and then take those lessons from them. But yeah, being able to shake those off, show that internal resilience of, okay, I did this wrong. Here's what, and we could probably go on for another hour of things I've done wrong in my career and recovering from those. But that would definitely be the third thing. Get your shoes dirty out there. Two, communicate with numbers, right?
Mhm.
Three, learn how to fail.
Perfect. We'll create another series just for failures in supply chain and how to, fix those as you go along. So this was such an incredible and insightful conversation, Bob. Thank you so much for your time. Focusing on what matters the most. And what I understood was people, time, and patience is what I got from this. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us. I hope it was as fun for you as it was for us as well today. And yeah, any last thoughts?
No, thank you very much. Very flattered to be here. Again, enjoyed the conversation. Yeah, as my kids will tell you, I can talk supply chain for days.
I'm loving the conversations of this. I think this is like a good amount of podcasts we've done so far. And every time when supply chain people or professionals talk to me, the passion that you guys have for the industry, it's amazing. And I've learned that this is not what you meant to do, but this is where you ended up and you're loving it. I think it was amazing. And thank you so much for your time.